Good morning, dear students. Welcome to this English lecture. And last video lecture, we studied poetry section. We studied first poem, Song of the Open Road. In that, we studied all about poets' information, all about explanation of the stanzas. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss poetical analysis, theme, symbol, central idea of the poem, and other critical analysis of the poem. So let's start today's lecture. The Song of the Open Road, which is written by Walt Whitman. Uh, he appeared in what many scholars deem one of the most influential poetry text of all time. This poem has taken Leaf of Grass, which was published on July 4th, 1855. A journalist and a teacher by trade, Walt Whitman is known as a poet and essayist. And many modern poets credit his poetry with inspiring and influencing their own works. Whitman was born on Long Island and grew up in the New York area. He had very little formal schooling, but he considered himself to be a lifelong learner. He took jobs as a print shops. Additionally, he taught school and worked on several newspapers. Whitman died at the age of 72 after suffering a debilitating stroke. His poems and essays are read in classrooms throughout the United States and the world. Now, according to this poem, The Song of the Open Road by Walt Whitman, it describes a trip the speaker takes in order to learn about himself and enjoy the journey to an unnamed destination. The speaker of the poem is describing a trip on which he is embarking. He describes himself as being healthy and free, and he realizes he is the only person who is in complete control of his life. He chooses his own destiny because of this realization. He does not have to wish or hope or pray for good fortune. He attests that he himself is his own good fortune, and that is all he needs. There is nothing that he is lacking. He will reach his destination on his own, and the earth will provide him with anything extra that is necessary. This is not to say that the road he is taking is not paved with imperfections and burdens rather than worry. However, the speaker has decided to take those burdens with him and deal with them as they arise. Now let's see the theme of the poem. Whitman engaged with important themes of uh, the poem Song of the Open Road. The themes such as freedom, the self, and the nature. In Song of the Open Road, his speaker, who is very likely Whitman himself, describes a journey he is embarking on. It is the open that is open. There is a whole line of freedom right in front of him that he is going to tap into. The journey he undertakes uh, also going to tell him about himself. He believes that he will come to fully depend on himself for everything. This will allow him to achieve a new perspective on his own abilities and new knowledge of what he values. So this is the theme of the poem. Now let's see the structure and form of the poem. The Song of the Open Road is separated into four separate stanzas, with the exceptions of the first stanza, which contains only 3 lines. The other stanzas contains 4 lines of verse. The poem utilizes free verse. The lines are unrhymed and varying length. Song of the Open Road is told from the first person point of view, and the speaker, perhaps Whitman, knows himself very well. Whitman is often referred to today as the father of free verse poetry. His use of his style of writing paved the way for generations of poets after him. Now let's see the literary devices of the poem Song of the Open Road. Whitman makes use of several literary devices in Song of the Open Road. These include but are not limited to enjambment, alliteration, and caesura. The first enjambment is common and useful poetic techniques that allows the poet to control how fast a reader moves through the lines of verse. One good example is the transition between lines 1 and 2 of the second stanza. Alliteration is another common device, but one that works to create a feeling of rhyme and rhythm. This is quite important in free verse poetry. Take for examples the words no need and nothing in line 2 of stanza 2, as well as complaints and criticisms in line 3 of the same stanza. Caesura is another formal techniques that involves splitting a line with punctuations. Takes for examples line 4 and second stanza. It reads strong and content. I travel the open road. This poem was one of the 20 new poems in the 1856 edition of Leaves of Grass, like Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, which appeared at the same time. It celebrates a communion and a democracy based on place. Here Whitman sets up the out of doors as a utopian democratic space in which all men can come together. This poem shows more structure than many of Whitman's work. From the cry of Alon's that opens many of the stanzas to the list and repeated phrase, this poem is truly does have the characters of a song, musical and rhythmic, while at the same time completely unconventional. In this poem, Whitman celebrates the out of doors and the road in particular as a space where men can come together in the meaningful way, where status and social markers matter less. A road is something everyone uses, whether they are rich or poor, and it forces all levels of people to associate with one another. The road furthermore signifies mobility. One can take the road to the road is the space for gathering the material for poetry. As he travels along it, he sees a variety of people and places. And here's a plethora of stories. He argues against staying in one place for too long. Although the hospitality may be a lure, for only the taste of the open road will do. By contrast, indoor spaces are fixed, and so stultifying as to be almost toxic. You must not say sleeping and dwelling there in the house. He commands indoors is a place of secret silent, loathing and despair. With death always lurks and people's bones are almost visible as a sign of their mortality and ended debasement. True companionship is not possible uh, in this indoor world for people bound by customs live too close together and knowledge of one another is the liability rather than a leakage of love. This is a call of arms and exhortations to those who are strong enough to join Whitman on the road. While for him the journey is the source of poetry, he sees it as something larger, as a way of life. The poetry is secondary, as he says. I and mine do not convince and arguments. Similes, rhymes, we convince by our presence. What is at stake is therefore more fundamental and more universal than literature. The road is symbol of a democratic and a vital society that just happens to make the good poetry. A theme such as a democracy as a way of life. Whitman envisions democracy not just a political system but as a way of experience the world. In the early 19th century, people still harbored many doubts about whether the United States could survive as a country and about whether democracy could thrive as a political system. To allay those fears and the praise democracy, Whitman tried to be democratic in both life and poetry. He imagines democracy as a way of interpersonal interaction and as a way for individuals to integrate their beliefs into their everyday lives. Song of Myself note that the democracy must include all individuals equally or else it will fall. In this poem, Whitman widened the possibilities of poetic dictions by including slang, colloquialism, and regional dialects rather than employing the stiff, erudite language so often found in 19th century verse. Similarly, he broadened the possibilities of subject matter by describing myriad people and places. Like William Wordsworth, Whitman believed that everyday life and everyday people were a fit subject for poetry. Although much of Whitman's work does not explicitly discuss politics, most of its implicity deals with democracy. It describes communities of people coming together and it imagines many voices pouring into the unified whole. For Whitman, democracy was an idea that could and should permeate the world beyond politics, making itself felt in the ways we think, speak, work, fight, and even with the words. Another important fact is that the beauty of the individual. Throughout his poetry, Whitman praised an individual. He imagined the democratic nation as a unified whole composed of unique but equal individuals. Song of Myself opens in a triumphant panel to the individuals, such as I celebrate myself and sing myself. Elsewhere, the speaker of the exuberant poem identifies himself as what Whitman and claims that through him the voices of many will speak. In this way, many individuals make up the individual's democracy. a single entity composed by myriad parts. Every voice, every part will carry the same weight within the single democracy, and thus every voice and every individual is equally beautiful despite the pluralistic views. Whitman still singled out specific individuals for praise in his poetry, particularly Abraham Lincoln. In 1865, Lincoln was assassinated, and Whitman began composing several elegies, including "O Captain, My Captain." Although all individuals were beautiful and worthy of praise, some individuals merited their own poems because of their contributions to society and democracy. Now let's see the main ideas such as the motives. Whitman filled his poetry with a long list. Often a sentence will be broken into clauses separated by commas, and each clause will describe some scene, person or object. This list create a sense of expansiveness in the poem as they mirror the growth of United States. Also, this list layer images atop one another to reflect the diversity of American landscape and people. In Song of Myself, for example, the speaker lists several adjectives to describe Walt Whitman in section 14. The speaker uses multiple adjectives to demonstrate the complexity of the individual. True individual cannot be described using just one or two words. Later in this section, the speaker also lists in different types of voices who speak through Whitman. Lists are another way of demonstrative democracy in action. In list, all atoms possess equal weight, and not atom is more important than another atom in the list. Uh, in a democracy, all individuals possess equal weight, and no individual is more important than another. Next important fact is that the human body. Whitman poetry reveals the depictions of the human body and the body's capacity of the physical context. The speaker's Song of Myself claims that a copulation is no more rank of for me. Second one, the rhythm and incantations. Many of the Whitman poems reveal the rhythm and repetitions to create a captivating, spellbinding qualities of incantations. Often Whitman's begins several lines in a row with the same word or phrases. Next one, the symbols of the poems. First symbol is that the plants, and second one that the self. The plants throughout Whitman's poetry. Plants' life symbolize both growth and multiplicity. Rapid regular plants growth also stand for the rapid regular expansions of the populations of the United States. And the next one, the self. Whitman's interest in the self ties into the praises of the individuals. Whitman links it the self of the conceptions of poetry throughout his work, envisaging the self as the birthplace of poetry. Most of his poems are spoken from the first person using the pronoun. The speaker of Whitman's most famous poems, Song of Myself. So in this way, this is very beautiful poem written by Walt Whitman, the Song of the Open Road. Thank you.